the Omnibus War of the city of Beacon in 1876. Welcome back, Beacon fans. This story is just another layer in the mysteries of the ghosts of the city of Beacon and how it all pertains to the old Fuller farm and the book House on Pancake Hill, written by Jody Sykes, a Beaconite whose family was a victim of the ghosts that haunted her house as a child. This video will be focusing on the Omnibus War that occurred in 1876 and the freaky links involved that tie it all together. Visit our YouTube channel and enjoy our historical and mystical videos we have already shared on this topic. It's Beacon's history and all the mystery that surrounds the progress of this city in the last 300 years. Jody writes about a very strange incident that happened on Christmas when her grandmother was staying with them. Sleeping alone in the living room near the fading fire, she woke to sounds of a childish giggling, opened her eyes, and saw before her spirits of two little Victorian girls that had visited and terrified Jody. Before Grandma could react, they simply vanished. She lay there stunned. Was I dreaming, she pondered? Suddenly, the silence of the cold winter night was interrupted by the sounds of a horse and carriage clomping down the road and mumbled voices of people talking. She grabbed her robe and went to the window to see what was going on. Women and men, dressed in Victorian clothing, were sitting on benches in front of the house. She hadn't seen those benches earlier, or had she? Horse-drawn stagecoaches would come up to the house and let people off the stage and take new passengers on. Grandma wondered if this was some sort of Christmas Eve entertainment or a production with actors. After a few minutes, no more people came, and the carriages did not return, and the streets felt very silent. She shook her head and went back to bed. Now, I'm reading this story in 2017, and this particular story about Jody's grandma instantly brought back to my mind something we had shrugged off and forgotten about. Back in 1997, my mother was home with my children and called me at work to ask me if Beacon was having a historical event somewhere. I said I didn't know of one and asked why. She said she heard something strange in the distance coming down the road, went to the window to see a horse and carriage with people dressed in old-fashioned clothing in it. We concluded that it was probably part of a wedding or a museum nearby. House on Pancake Hill is not far from my house. Had we stepped into the very portal that was affecting Jody's family? Or were we actually part of it? We share on our ghost walk many of these connections. Some people think it's all nonsense and craziness. My husband's favorite saying is we're all crazy, just some more than others. Some people share their own paranormal stories on our tours, which we love. Some people are freaked out and want to flee and can't wait to leave. But in the end, Beacon has proved itself to be quite mysterious. So, of course, we did some digging, and here is the research of the House on Pancake Hill as it pertains to horse-drawn carriages and the city of Beacon, and the freaky links that continue to this day. And trust me, there are more. Stay with us to the end. An old 1867 map had the initials JH indicated near House on Pancake Hill on East Main Street, then called Fountain Street. You see, Beaconites throughout time sectioned off portions of the city and nicknamed them accordingly. There was Walcottville, Burnsville, Chicken Hill, Glory Hill, Red Rock, and Fiddler's Green. Residents who lived near the river became river rats. Those who lived near the mountain were mountaineers, and in between were swamp angels. The city of Beacon was once split into two villages, Fishkill Landing and Madawan. In the diaries of Abiel T. LaForge, who often came to visit his relatives at our house in the 1860s, would often rent a horse and carriage to visit other villages and take rides with any young girl he could convince to join him. A newspaper in 1872 stated that our omnibus service to and from Longdock at Fishkill Landing in Madawan is well patronized. This omnibus service was formed by Cyrus Hancock and Roswell Judson. An omnibus is a horse-drawn carriage that would transport groups of people from the river to the mountain throughout the day and night, much like the loop bus that starts at Beacon's train station, loops up to the base of Mount Beacon, along Howland Avenue, down East Main to Main Street, and back to the train station. Cyrus Hancock was born in Massachusetts. His father, Levi, was a tin peddler who took over and ran the pool hall on Main Street and one of the shops across from the Howland Cultural Center. Captain LaForge writes about going to this pool hall to visit his friends and play pool. When he would come and visit this 5-square-mile city around 1865, he also wrote about parties with his friends at the Dibble Hotel, drinking wine and stealing kisses from girls till 2 a.m. But as the factories grew, along with the bars, by the 1870s, violence and crime had increased. In fact, a much advertised incident went down in Matawan when a rowdy bunch of hard drinkers arrived in Hancock's billiard saloon early on a Sunday morning. From there, the group traveled a few shops down to Horan's Gin Shop near the Methodist Church under the shadow of the pine-clad Fishkill Mountains. Apparently not worried about the Sunday services in the church nearby, Horan had advertised a cockfight for that morning. All ordered up drinks and began to have a good time until a fight broke out over the pricing of the whiskey. One angry customer attacked bar owner Mr. Horan. Mrs. Horan, the opposite of a lovely Victorian quiet lady, jumped on the man beating her husband and broke numerous bottles over his head and body. The rest of the crowd tore up the place fighting. One man whipped out his gun and shot it into the air. A bullet whizzed past Mrs. Horan's head, making her dive into the floor and take cover, as well as the other fighting men in the room. The man continued to shoot everything in sight in the store. Later, Dr. D.P. Skank was called in to help. The doctor said the wounded man that Mrs. Horan had beat up had looked like he had been shot through a glass window factory. Mr. Horan had been shot and died the next day. Cyrus Hancock was not part of this drinking group, but was well known as an expert in the game of billiards, not just in this village of Matawan, but one of the best in the country, and ran the pool hall into the 1900s. Cyrus worked for a time in his youth at the New York Rubber Company on Tyranda Avenue and formed a partnership with Roswell Judson to put together the Judson and Hancock Omnibus service. In 1880, the census of both Hancock and Judson state occupation as keeping a livery. More than likely, Cyrus and his wife and children lived in the house on Pancake Hill and ran the omnibus service from there. Cyrus had a son named Harry. He was a bit of a problem. By age 16, Harry had also become a billiard expert like his father, but he also had been kicked out of the Matawan Union Free School. Cyrus wanted to sue the school for this. Harry worked at a pharmacy for a while and then went away to college to study medicine. And as the story goes, he had to have an appendectomy done. And after surgery, he became addicted to morphine. And Harry became out of control. His father arranged to have him committed to the state mental institution in Poughkeepsie and hired a guide to come pick him up and take him there. Just before they got to the institution, Harry said he needed to make a very necessary stop. The guide let him. But Harry pulled out a gun from his pocket and at gunpoint backed away and took off. At one point, he robbed an Italian immigrant and asked for his clothing, gave him money for his clothing so he could buy new clothes, and went off again into the woods. Strangely, exhausted and sleeping on the grounds of the Roosevelt estate, he was recovered and taken to the mental institution. And that's all we know of what happened to Harry. Roswell S. Judson, born in Fairfield, Connecticut, arrived in Matawan when he was 30 years old as an engineer. Roswell lived 2 doors down from Durkin's Grocery Market on Leonard Street. He was married with 3 children who never married or left their family home. His daughter Alice would become a well-known American painter specializing in landscapes and seascapes of the Hudson Valley in Massachusetts. Roswell was a member of the Republican Party and president of the village of Matawan. His neighbor was John Langford Hall, the grandson of Sophia and Josiah, the farmers from my house. And John was the first chief of police for Matawan. And the village of Matawan kept Chief Hall very, very busy. Now we come to the Great Omnibus War of 1876. The Judson and Hancock Omnibus service was thoroughly enjoyed by the community. The fare to and from Fishkill Landing to Matawan was 15 cents. But the vision of a quaint and quiet Victorian village began to emerge more like the Wild Wild West. In 1876, competition came to the Judson and Hancock Omnibus service. It was called the New York Transportation Company. This new omnibus service would go from Newburgh across the river to Fishkill to Matawan and so on, and would cause a higher burden of taxes for the twin villages. And they also undercut the pricing of Judson and Hancock in ticket prices. The newspaper stated that the excitement of this omnibus competition was unequaled in the history of the village of Mattawan. The failure of the seamless clothing factory did not cause such an outbreak. It became the chief and almost only topic of conversation for a number of days. At the workbench, in the stores, on the streets, at political meetings, on Sunday, in the homes of people, everywhere heated conversations chattered on about the Omnibus War, with most of the community in favor of Judson and Hancock. Crowds of excited men filled the stages of J&H for the sole purpose to show their support and their opposition to the new line. As the carriages rode along the street, the passengers would cheer for J&H and boo the new line as they passed by. The fervor became so intense that violence broke out. Drivers of the new line were either assaulted and dragged from their carriage seat or had rocks or missiles thrown at them. The paper stressed that these violent individuals had sunken into mob law and were dangerous to society and should be arrested. The community decided to try and put the high emotional fire out by organizing what they termed an indignation meeting at Swift Hall, now Key Food Grocery on Main Street. Eventually, the matter was brought before the courts, and in 1877, the Newburgh Transportation Company bought out Judson and Hancock, thus ending the stage war. Judson and Hancock took over the roundhouse building, repairing and manufacturing machinery. Cyrus went into the management of hotels, and Judson created machinery patents. They also did stonework for projects, such as the new stone dam near the mouth of the Fishkill Creek after the old wooden one was carried away by ice the previous winter in 1880. Old hatreds and tempers flared from time to time over the subject. Even in 1910, a tragic incident occurred for the owner of the omnibus service at that time, Weldon F. Weston, and we heard about him in the Abraham Seaman tragedy series. One Wednesday morning, Weston's horse was found dead in his stall. Investigation showed a knife had been used on the horse that was cut several inches long and 2 to 4 inches deep. They never found the culprit or the reason. The Fishkill Electric Railroad Company was formed in 1895, going up and down Main Street to the village of Fishkill and eventually to the base of Mount Beacon to bring guests to ride up the trolleys on Mount Beacon Incline. By 1927, a group of businessmen took possession of the trolley system with lawyer James G. Meyer. We heard about him in the Abraham Seaman tragedy, and he was the new board of directors president. In 1930, the Fishkill National Bank purchased the former Western Livery Stable on Main Street, which had gone bankrupt near the old Tompkins Hose at a foreclosure. Now, here is another interesting, freaky link between the omnibus service and House on Pancake Hill. Besides the great intensity of negative energy it all stirred up in the area, it seems that the house was somehow meant to carry on its original business. The current owners of House on Pancake Hill are Greg and Helen Zuman. They completely gutted the house and rebuilt it into a beautiful home and Airbnb. They also transport guests from the river to the mountain in their rickshaw business. A bit of history they did not know until we found this research a couple years ago. So 155 years later, House on Pancake Hill is still transporting guests around the city of Beacon. They say that ghosts are produced by leftover energy, and the city of Beacon certainly had a high level of energy all around it over the 300 years of its progress. As you're walking from the restaurants or an evening stroll along Main Street, stop and see if you can hear whispers of the omnibus wars or hear clomping of horses and carriages continuing its route around the city.